Hello, this is part two of the 52 Ford half-ton gauge restoration or rebuild. The first part I did the speedo and put the odometer back to 0, as you can see, and cleaned it up all nice. That's the actual gauge cluster with the temperature, battery, fuel, and oil. For this truck, we're going to only use the fuel and the battery. We're going to put actually mechanical gauges for the temperature and oil, because these are electronic. So, and then I got to convert the fuel gauge and the battery to, from this truck's 6-volt positive ground, I got to change it to 12-volt negative ground. So it's no problem with the battery. You just have to put the wire in the opposite direction in this little hoop. The fuel gauge, we have to run a regular 6-volt sender out of the like stock sender unit out of the tank, and I got to put a voltage reducer on this gauge. You can buy them. You can buy them. They're called Runtz, or other manufacturers call them differently. But I'm gonna make one from just electronic parts. I got plans off the internet. So first thing is to take this apart. These are circuit breakers, which I no longer need. So that's gonna come off. If you were planning on using, like, if you had a stock gauge, if you had a stock 52 Ford and you were just converting it to 12-volt negative ground, and you wanted to keep the temperature and oil gauge, that's fine. You just need the original sender units, and then you would have to put a voltage reducer on each one. So that's very easy. I'll show you how you can do that easily with this also when I get to that point, but right now it's just pulling it apart. There's the bulb. That'll have to be changed to 12-volt bulb as well. There is this gauge. This chrome ring here is held on by just being crimped in a few places, so you gently bend out the crimps. It is a stainless steel ring, so it is very tough, but it does bend. And give it a little twist. Pry, and voila. That, I'm guessing, sat in there. It's just a diffuser for the light. And that's just painted black. This will come apart a little bit more. Actually feels like it's glued. That's in relatively good shape. That's just tin metal. I don't think I'm gonna paint that. It is just painted silver and black, but it looks in great shape. So I will probably leave that as is. The glass, as you can see, that's remnants of a cork glass or a cork gasket in there, and I'm just going to make my own gasket using weather stripping adhesive for regular door household unit, windows, doors, whatever. But we'll put that aside. Bring this back. So now it's time to pull out the gauges. Now before I can do that, I got to pull this strap out. And I believe what that was for is just to connect the powers for the 3 gauges. It might be the ground, I'm not sure, but there's lots of wiring diagrams on the internet for these things. I'm not doing anything that hasn't been done before, but except that I'm actually making my own voltage reducers. I won't need all these old wires. And there's, I'll throw up a little diagram and it'll tell you, at least I think I have a diagram I'll put up that it'll tell you which one's positive, negative. And there's just 2 Phillips screws holding each gauge. That's the fuel. And one reason why we're not using the electronic temperature and electronic oil pressure gauge, because we've switched the motor to a Chevy 350, and to make this work, this one's a tight one, we have to use the original sender units for the flathead. So then I would have to adapt them to a Chevy mower. That wouldn't be a difficult job, but we like mechanical gauges. They're more accurate, we find. Temperature. And I do have a parts gauge, just in case anything's broken, missing. And that is very simple battery gauge. Basically, you feed the battery off the alternator or your generator through there, and it reads there. And to change that from 6-volt positive ground to 12-volt negative ground, you just reverse the direction the wire goes. So that's very simple. And that's the oil. And that's in decent shape. Just a little bit of dirt there, but that seems to be just rubbing off with my hands. The previous gauge, it was a little bit corroded, rusted, so I ended up sanding it down and painting it white again. This one, I think I'm just going to leave it Just clean it up. The back was never painted, so I think I'm just going to leave that like that. Clean up the gauge faces a little bit. It's hard to tell, but there is a little bit of dirt in it and dirt on the back, but I'm not gonna take that off. That's gonna stay. This, as I said, I'm not going to, the only thing you see is this inside here, and it looks very nice. Just has to be cleaned up with a little bit of soap and water, and I think that'll be fine. The glass also is not scratched or anything that I can see. I've got a spare one if I need to, but then I just have to get rid of the cork remnants in there, and then just lightly sand the rust around here, and then buff this red edge. That's what you see coming out of the dash. So that next step is to well, I'll clean all that stuff up, and then I will make my little voltage reducer. Okay, this is how I'm going to make my little voltage reducer. This is a little voltage reducer. I'll give you the specs. I'll write down the spec because it's hard to, the camera won't even pick it up. But basically, this is the first pin here is the input. There's a ground and then the output. Then I've got those little things. Those are capacitors. I got two different size capacitors. This is a 10 microfarad and this is a 1 microfarad. So what I'm going to do is you basically solder a wire onto here, just a regular old whatever wire you have, with a round connector or a butt connector. So you attach a wire to there. That's your input. So that'll come from your 12 volt source. Because this reduces from 12 volts down to 6 volts. Then you attach a wire from the middle one to your ground, which will be on the gauge cluster itself. And then you attach the one on the right here, another wire, and that will go to whatever gauge you want to reduce. In this instance, it'll go to my fuel gauge, the positive of the fuel gauge. But you also need one of these, or use two of these capacitors, one 10 microfarads and one microfarad one. You put the 10 microfarad one on the input, which is from the first pin to the second pin, the middle pin, and then you take the 1 microfarad one and go from the last pin to the middle. And that basically, I'm not 100% like electrician, or electronics guy, but what that does, it smooths out the voltage going in and out. So the 10 microfarad smooths out the 12 volts going in, and then the 1 microfarad smooths out the 6 volts going out. So I've done this is basically just a quick and dirty one I've done. I'm planning on making it better. I didn't attach the wire leads going out, but that's basically how it'll the capacitors sit. Let's see if I can turn that sideways. but that was just a first attempt at it. I plan on making it better and looking decent and more professional. But okay, I'm going to start building my voltage reducer. I'll give you the specs. As I said before, I'll put them in the video, what the capacitors are in the voltage reducer. The capacitors don't have to be exactly these numbers. They can be off. It's just there to clean up the voltage a bit. What I do, and this is actually, like, I built this prototype, but I've never actually tested it. I've never had one of these in the car. So this is just new for me too. And like, I've taken electronics when I was in high school, and I'm sort of in the, well, I'm in the audio and video field, so I know a little bit about electronics. But basically, I just bent, I don't know if you can see, I just bent the input and output tab up. That just gives me room to maneuver. And I'm just basically doing this on my kitchen table, so you can do it anywhere you want, really. First thing I do is, it's called tinning. You put, that's a solder. Just put a little bit of solder and get it on each of the 3 feet. That makes it easier attaching. You can put a little blob. See, there's little blobs of solder. Then you take your first capacitor. This is the 10 microfarad. There is a positive and negative. The positive is always the one with the longer leg on it. This one's slightly longer, so that's the positive. And that's the one you want going to the first pin. So what I'm just going to do is just slightly, what I do is slightly bend, that's the negative actually. I will solder on the negative first. And in rights, you should basically tin this. I got a little bit of solder on the iron already, so that's fine. Place it on the center ground pin. Heat it up until the solder liquefies and it's attached. Then the positive, since I've bent it up, I'm just going to bend the positive of that capacitor up. And I'm doing this without a clamp. It'd be best to actually clamp the voltage reducer in. You can get little electronic clamps. And again, this isn't for everyone. If you want to buy yours, it's perfectly fine. They're not hugely expensive, but all these parts, cost me about $25, and I've got enough to do at least 3 gauges. One of these at Speedway is about $25. So that's not the reason I'm doing it. I'm just doing it because I can. And I do the same thing. Find the positive and negative. That's the positive, and then bend up the negative. Place that on the negative. Heat up the solder a bit till it liquefies. Done. I'm going to put a little bit of more solder on that one. And you also got to worry about the capacitor falling off as you heat it up. Like that one did. Just want to get it in a better spot. And you got to just make sure that the first capacitor you soldered onto the ground is still attached, which it is. And then I'm just going to bend the positive one so it matches the angle of the output, and solder that on. Now this big blob of solder, I don't want that, so there we go. So, if you can see, that is the starter one. Now I can see, there. Thought there was some solder touching, but just make sure that none of the 3 pins are touching. That's just my cat wanting attention. And I've got some old wire here. It's all the same color, so I'm just gonna cut off about 6 inches. Strip about 1/4 inch maybe off of each one. Okay. 3 wires stripped. Now I want to put a little solder on each one of those. Put that aside. So heat up the end of the wire, add a little solder. There. Alright, so I'm back. The camera, I was having difficulties, and the camera actually, the battery died, so I had to charge that. So what I did, just got some vice grips to hold it, and it's working out pretty good. I got 1 wire soldered on. Do the second wire. Vice grips aren't perfect, but they're working. Third wire. Put this on top. Okay, everything is soldered on. I just want to see if I got put a little bit more solder on the last one. There we go. Just taking a look. Nothing's touching. Now, then I just have to put whatever connector I need to on those. What I'm going to do is put some heat shrink. This just protects it, the joint a little more. If it gets, if the pins get bent, they won't touch each other. That, and I'm also going to cut 2 little ones. And put those over the heads of the capacitors just for extra protection. Then take a lighter. Heat that stuff up so it shrinks. A little crispy there. It's okay. There. So that's all done. Now, I've also read that these voltage reducers, they heat up. So you need to have some sort of heat sink to draw away the heat. So what I decided, it's just a little piece of aluminum edging. I'm going to, I'll show you on, this is the back of the gauge cluster. All the gauges go in there. This was attached to there. That was the circuit breakers. So what I'm going to do is drill 2 holes, screw that on there, and then this will get screwed into there, and these wires will go to the corresponding fuel gauge. And basically you could do that with, you could put 3 of them on this one heatsink, and if you wanted to use your battery and battery, oil, and temperature gauge, all 3, or not the battery, but the other 2 that we are not going to be using. So that is That's how you make your own voltage reducer from 12 volt to 6 volt. Basically, the 12 volt comes in here. That's the ground. That'll just go to any ground on here anywhere. And then that wire is going to be 6 volts out. It should be relatively 6 volt. It might be 5.5. I'm not sure. But yeah, I just got to put the appropriate connectors on there, and once I get everything cleaned up, that'll all go back together. So, okay, next thing to do is take the stainless bead, and as I did with the other gauge, I just cut a piece of foam weather stripping, household weather stripping. That's going to act as my gasket. I left the paper on it because it's sticky one side, so I left the paper on there so it wouldn't get stuck. Glass goes in. Like so. That will cushion the glass. This piece is just a tin or thin aluminum, I think it is, piece. There's a little notch there that corresponds to the notch in there. So that's easy enough. And that's in. And there's also a notch in there, so that's going to line up with that notch. So we'll put that notch in first. And it's not going down. There it goes. Now, get some cardboard just to cushion. Put it upside down. Got my hammer, and to seal this, you basically bend the stainless over this piece. So I've tried a couple methods. I've tried pliers, doesn't work, so I'm just gonna cushion it with the cardboard. And sorry for the jostling camera. I'm just holding it tight against the cardboard, and it's crushing the, well, it's not crushing the glass, but crushing that gasket that I put, so it'll be nice and tight, hopefully. Do that a little bit more. One more. Let's see. Yeah, nice and tight. And you can see. Okay, just finishing up on the gauge cluster. One thing I forgot to put in, but I forgot there was a little plastic clear diffuser for the light bulb. It was just basically a circle, so it was still flexible enough where I just managed to get it back in the hole. Then it spread apart so it doesn't fall out. That just diffuses the light from the bulb into the 4 gauges. So that prevented me from taking it all apart again. And I put ends on two of the wires from my little voltage reducer. I left this is the 12 volt power. I left that open because I'm not sure what kind of connector I'll use, either just a butt connector like that, or I'll probably put up one that I can plug and unplug, just in case I have to take the gauge out for some reason. It can all come out as a unit. You could, like, I'm bolting this to this aluminum. I made it a heat sink because I read somewhere where these do heat up, but like the Runtz ones, they bolt directly to there. So I'm pretty sure this is the almost identical to a Runtz one. So I don't know how much they're going to heat up, but so I'm pretty sure you could probably just bolt it there, make it a little simpler, but I'm going to bolt it up top. And I will just got a little tiny screw to go into there. The little lock washer and a nut. And I will leave it loose right now. Just get it tightened or snug up so it doesn't move. So that's going to be my 12 volt power. This is going to be my ground, and that's just going to go to there. That's the mount for the gauge. This one's going to go to the gauge itself, and I'm only using the fuel gauge. So this will go on there. Put one of the nuts that came with it, or came off it. And I might have to, I'm going to leave that like that. I may have to, depending, I can't remember what the underneath the dash looks like. I might have to pull, mount this like this. I'm not sure, but I will just leave it loose for now. That's just snug. And then last thing to do is, that's an old 6 volt bulb. I've got 12 volt bulb replacements. They fit in. And I'll use this, the wire's still in good shape, so I'll just cut that and put a connector on it. And that's about it. So, as I said before, yeah, you can, there's easier ways of doing this. You can buy the Runtz, you can get voltage reducers off the, like, even up 70s Fords, I believe, behind the gauges, so you could use that. But I decided I'll see if I can make one, and yeah, you can make one. It just takes a little bit of time. I got all the components. I'll put a list of the components I got. I got them off a website, DigiKey. They're just a mail or electronics store. And there's the second one I made. So that's for another gauge, or I have enough component, like, as I said before, I spent like $26 Canadian, and that was including shipping, and I have enough to do probably 3 or 4 of these, depending on, like this one I only use one, but I have enough to make like 12 of these voltage reducers for 26 bucks Canadian. So it's, you're looking at $22 American just for to do like at least 3 of these gauges if you want to do. So a little bit of soldering. If you want to do it, go that way. Yeah, that's quite all right. I decided to make it just to try it, and I'm not even sure if these work. I'll test it out once I get closer to putting it in the truck. I'll just hook it up, and we don't have the fuel gauge yet or the fuel sender, so we're just waiting on that, but it should work. I don't have any reason why it shouldn't unless the gauge is gone, which I have a backup, so that's do that. But yeah, that's all done. I'll put a link, yeah, as I said, I'll put a link to the components, or I'll put them on the screen of the all the components. So there's that one, all done. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Say hi.